out and start from the beginning. So create new, and then I just look over here really quickly and make sure I have inches. And that's important to check. Sometimes people choose pixels instead, then they have like a very, very small file that could result. So 10 inches by 10 inches, 300 resolution for the pixels per inch. And then Adobe RGB 1998 for the color profile. If you don't see the advanced options, you can click on this arrow to expand and see the advanced options. And that's just a larger color space, it's called, which just sort of gives you more options for the colors that you bring into your work. Because it's square, it doesn't matter if it's portrait or landscape. The square, of course, is not relevant to that. So we're just going to click on create here. You could choose black or white, but that doesn't really matter because you're going to be like covering your background over with a new shape layer for being like, say, the background color. I'm going to actually demo how you can be doing that differently though in this tutorial. So now that we have this blank one, I could zoom out a little bit, but going to my zoom tool, and then for myself, I choose this just to be the default because there's a shortcut. If you want to make it zooming out, which would be minus, you could click on this to zoom out, but I don't do that because there's a shortcut. If I push the Option key on a Mac or the Alt key with a PC, that is just a shortcut to just go to the other mode for zooming. So I can just zoom out this way, and then if I release the keyboard, the key on my keyboard, it just is the default, which would be plus for zooming in. So I'm going to just zoom out one notch, be here. Of course, fit screen would be a shortcut if I want to sort of just fill my screen, or I could do control click, and I see that there are some like options here for zooming in and zooming out with the zoom tool. Okay, so you might have a version. If you click on this double notched arrow right here, there are different ways of viewing your toolbar on the right. And depending on like what you're seeing with Photoshop, you might already actually be seeing, for example, this little picture right here on the right, on the left side of your screen. If you see this little icon for the tool, that means you already have the shape tools available to you as a bundle on your version of Photoshop. And that means that if you were to click and hold your cursor, it would reveal not this menu, but it would reveal a side menu that would be these shape tools bundled together. And it looks like most of you have a version of Photoshop that has things set up in this way. But I want to show you how you can actually edit your toolbar. If you look at the three dots right here for editing toolbar, select that. Right now, I don't have the shape tool currently in my main batch of tools, which would be the left view right here. If I scroll through here, I can see that they're right here, and I can actually add them from my extra tools menu into the main part of my visible toolbar. And that is actually similar to what you guys apparently already seem to have. And I'm going to put this next to my type tool. So that's a rectangle, and then I can just add these inside of it, one by one. I think I tried to do this with a group selection, and it seems like it's only possible to do it one by one. Or if there's a way to do it as a group, I'm just not sure what that is. Oh yeah, I made a mistake. This is actually outside right now. I want them to be bundled in, so I just sort of move this so it's a blue line inside of this batch. And then the last one, custom shape here. I myself don't use the line tool very much, so I can just rearrange the sequence of these bundled tools. And indeed, if I want the custom shape tool at the very top, I can just move that to the top of the stack. But here, I'm going to put it second from the bottom, because that's an order that works well for me. And then I can click on done, done, and then I see it visible to me right here. If I go back to my single column view for the toolbar, it's right here next to my type tool, which is where I placed it. Okay, I'm going to click, and then I'm going to jump to the Polygon tool because I did see what they had changed in Photoshop for the star setting. So Command apostrophe to show my grid. And then I can click on the middle. Now it's going to be clicking from the corner and dragging over, but if I hold down the Option key, that is a way to keep it centered with my origin point. Now you can see I already have a star here because I just sort of tinkered with this and figured out what the setting was. I'm going to undo that and show you where the setting is here under the cog menu. Again, you need to have your shape tool selected here, which I can confirm. It's here in my upper left. These are the options then for that tool. And then here's my gear. Click on that. And here's the deal, your default, and this is what's different with this new version of Photoshop. The way it works out is that the default is for the star ratio to be 100, which just means that there actually is no star. If it's 100, when I click and drag like this, it's a regular polygon. In this case, it's a hexagon, and I can go to my properties panel or click in, yeah, or just like go to my options bar right here. But here's a way to do it through your properties panel, which shows up. I can change the number of sides, and it updates automatically, which is really cool and interesting to see. At a certain point, it begins to feel like an ellipsis because there are just so many sides. It looks like an ellipsis, but technically it's actually not. If I were to zoom in, I should be able to see little tiny sides, like little tiny sides, lines, here. But I'm going to go back to this and just go back to where it's more clearly something different. So let's just do a three-sided. I'm going to zoom out with my keypad here, just a little shortcut. I can go to the hand tool. Oops, the move tool. Oops, move. Oh yeah, V is the shortcut for move. I don't know why I forgot that. I always remember. So V here to just sort of slightly center it, in my canvas. Go back to my properties here, and yeah, this just updates as I change the shape. It updates. I'll just make it a three-sided thing for the triangle. And that's one shape. But then if I want to create another shape with a different version, go back to my Polygon tool, click on the gear icon, and then here let's create what would be a pretty heavily indented star. So 20% would be digging in from the outside edges to the 20% towards the middle is what that really means. So if we create a new shape here, just hovering over, let's make this, yeah, well, we'll just see in a second. I'll just change the color in a moment. But yeah, keeping it centered with my Option key, holding down the Option and clicking, and then release. And then if I want to change the color, just like, have some difference of contrast. Again, no black, white, or gray here, so let's maybe choose a complementary color to this kind of green, and maybe it's a kind of like a kind of a pale purple. I might choose for it for contrast. If I click out of it, then I can see, and then I'll just disengage my grid view. So here's, really simple. There's a lot more that I could do with this to develop it creatively, but we have an example of the star. Now, the way that Photoshop is designed, I can't just go into my properties panel and then change the star setting here. It would be nice if I could do so, but the way that the star setting, oh, actually I can change the points, and that will update the points, and that's super nice. I can explore a lot of possibilities pretty quickly for what it looks like with different numbers of points. And that's what it is if you have a star indentation. Instead of sides, they become how many points there are for the star. But the indentation itself also, I think with Photoshop, yeah, I was afraid that was the case. Yeah, I can't click directly and drag to change the indent. So that's just a thing that you need to keep in mind for this particular tool, for the Polygon tool. You need to do a preloading of the setting. Like if I want to explore a stronger indent, like say 8% from the middle is what that really means for the indentation from the outside. I'll just delete this. Bring back my grid, Command apostrophe, Option click and drag, and then this is an 8% indent, and I can just change this, change this fill color to that purple, light purple here. Again, really quickly, and then click out, and then here is an 8% indent with my star. So it does need to be preloaded as far as the star ratio. That percentage is how far from the middle towards the outside is the indentation of the star. So this is 8% from the middle. And that's what that number means right here. Let's try smooth star indents and check out what that might be. And actually, we can just click on do it from the center as another sort of preference for this tool. And I'll just delete both of these. And now I don't actually have to hold down the Option key. It is indenting automatically from the origin point because of the option that I had selected here. From center. That just makes sure that it's centering from your click point automatically instead of what it was a moment ago. So these are smooth star indents, and those are not indenting as much. That's fun. That's totally fun and cool, and that works out really nicely. 8% really. That does not feel like 8%. Well, now I want to experiment. Let's try this with 90%. I'm going to anticipate what that's going to look like. It's going to be a very subtle indentation, and then there we go, a nice subtle indentation like so. Now these points here at the tips, you can modify those directly with one of these settings here. So here it's a square point. Oh, is that? Oh, it needs to be preloaded. Let's just try this again. It's not updating automatically. That's unlike some software I was using recently. So it looks like Photoshop hasn't. Well, it's still not really quite. Oh, I think that's for the stroke. Yeah, I'm going to actually just apply stroke here because that's something I didn't mention during class. That's part of the demo here. If I want to add a stroke to this, I could like say add a blue stroke to this object, and that's under the properties panel. It's also up here in the options panel for the tool here. And so here I've just added a blue stroke. I could change the thickness of that outline with this slider right here, or it's this slider right here. I could change the type of stroke, dotted line, dashes rather, or like little dots for the type. And then you have some options below, and you can just like really play around with this and just do different things for the quality of the stroke that you put around a shape. And so that's a lot of available cool things to play around with here. So I think actually what actually these pertain to would be the edge of the stroke. Let me just zoom in to see if that really updated. Yeah, this may or may not, be something that is so interesting to you for your work. I do want to sort of just check through. Yeah, I'll talk about this in a second, but these are not updating, which is interesting. I wonder if those need to be presets. These are really small details that are not going to necessarily be so visible. But let me just go back in here. I have this tool selected, I have this layer selected right here, and you might be wondering, oh, well, where is it up here in my toolbar? Let's just imagine the properties panel is closed. Where is it up here? Well, right now I have the zoom tool selected, so you need to actually go back to your shape tool and click on it, then you'll have these options come back. So again, these options are specific to the given tool which is currently selected. So you just got to be mindful of clicking back into that tool in order to be able to see these settings right here. I'm going to deselect a stroke so there will be no stroke applied. Okay, there we go. It just finally updated and then the stroke disappears. Yeah, rounding the corner, this is another thing about Photoshop for an update that, oh no, here we are. Okay, that's just a little bit different than where we were last semester. So let me make this a pretty big change, 500. And this would be a preload, I think. I'm going to make this disappear just a second. Do this again, and there we can see that it's updating with rounded corners here, and that's what this value is right here. Is it's how many pixels, and that's just something to explore. It's like, well, what number is going to be enough to have some sort of impact on it? If I compare 500 to say 25, and then let's indent this a lot more for comparison. Let's make it like the 5%. I said 5%, and I mean it. 5%. So 5% from the center. Cool. I have 25 pixels I'm comparing, and let's just do this 6-pointed star. Let me just delete these two, and then I'll start from scratch with a new object. And then there we go. And that's actually pretty nice. A smaller number for the pixels for the rounded edge, and then this is the indentation. I would actually love it if it indented further. I actually don't know why it's indenting a lot more, because this is really a pretty big percentage. But I guess with this version of Photoshop, it's just not going to be indenting as much if I have a smooth star indent selected. Now I'm going to actually compare like one more version of this where it's not smooth indents. So therefore it should be a really deep cut for the 5%, but I still have the rounded tips with my 25 pixels here for the rounded edge. Let's just sort of see how that looks. And then there we go. So pretty quickly, you're getting actually all kinds of like really different things going on with the quality of just this polygon. The number of points, is it a star or not a star? Do I have smooth star indents or not? And then, if I want rounded tips, to what degree do I want those rounded tips to be? If they want them to be, much more rounded, it'll be a bigger value here. And there's not like a particular magic number. Just experiment with, bigger or smaller values of pixels and just see what you get. Going through that process. But yeah, one thing that is really nice, if you go back to your properties panel, this icon here, is that you can indeed change the number of points, and it does update automatically, which is just really nice and cool to be able to see. Updating the number of points and also changing the color. As a review for the gradient, I'm going to do the gradient in a moment. But you could just change the solid color here. Let me just cancel here. Click on solid. This icon is a solid color menu, and then I can just quickly update with these presets, or like I did in class demo today, click on this multicolored little box right here to get your color picker. So this is your hue slider, all the colors of the rainbow, and then you can choose your particular values of saturation and lightness, brightness. So maybe like I want something a little bit more subdued. And I click out of that layer to get all of this distracting stuff to disappear, or I could choose a different tool to get those things to disappear. But what were those things all about? I'm going to click back into my shape tool, and if I have my shape tool selected, this is essentially a shortcut to the transform tool, the free transform tool. And that means if I were to click and drag, I could make this a smaller shape or a bigger shape. And one thing that's kind of cool, if I zoom out, I could actually have this shape go well beyond the bounds of my canvas, and it just sort of like has these things, dropping off the edges. And that has its own kind of interesting, quality and feeling about it. If I go back to this, I can see how it's actually going beyond my canvas. So that shape actually still exists, but it's just going beyond the edges of my, my art space or my canvas for my composition. Now, you do not need to transform to a smart object because vector shapes, they're already maintaining quality. You can stretch and pull, you can make them small, you can make them big, and they're always maintaining quality because they're vector graphics. They're based upon lines. Yeah, basically they're based upon lines, lines of geometry to actually define the edges of the shape. Like typography. Typography, like you guys checked out earlier this week, that's another example of vectors. So you can scale them up, scale them down, and there's no fear of losing quality because they are infinitely scalable and you maintain quality as you stretch and pull them. So no need for smart objects when you have vector shapes that you're working with. Okay. So let's say that I want to bring in my background. There's a couple of things that you can do to actually colorize your background. What I did in class as a demo is I changed my shape tool to the rectangle tool. I clicked and dragged outside my canvas area so I'm fully covering the canvas area. And then I could have a solid color, something which is not black, white, or gray. And I could explore different possibilities for my presets right here. Or I could just jump into this multicolored box right here and really just choose the specific hue and then the specific saturation and lightness, brightness value here. And maybe I want like this really bright kind of cyan here. I can click out and then there we go. Or I could create a gradient, and if you want to, have like a centered kind of scheme going on, it can be interesting to have a radial gradient. So if I go onto this tool right here, I have my shape tool selected, so I have this options bar available right here. I can click on my fill box and then click on gradient. And then when I go in here, let's just say I want to just go straight to a, let me cancel that. I want to go straight to a radial gradient to have this sense of like an inner glow. And then this is where I need to actually change the values of my colors in the gradient editor. So I can double click on this to change what's going to be in the middle of that. And let's just say I want a glowy, like a really light pale. Oh, this is the outside. Okay, so no, this is the inside. So it's going to be like a pale, let's go for a contrasting color. Yeah, sort of like maybe like a palish yellow here. Let me bring in this rectangle to be what's covering the background with a color. And we'll go in here to choose a gradient for it. And then it didn't update. Okay, yeah, so in this box, you just sort of just choose one of these presets initially to get an update. You could just choose like one of these crazy ones. I would highly recommend, though, to make your work more distinctive, don't just stick with one of these presets because these are standard presets. And there might be any number of other students that use similar standard presets for the gradient. But what's nice about these presets is if you actually want to explore a 3-color gradient, it gets you started, at which point you could actually click in here to change the colors of that gradient. For this demo, I'm actually going to have just a 2-color gradient from simple black to simple white, or I could just do it from red to green, which honestly I'm not crazy of. Those look really kind of like odd, especially this muddiness in the middle. Yeah, not into that. But as a starting point, I have 2 color stops here, and I'll just keep it on linear for now. I'll just go to radial, because that's what I was going to demo a second ago. So when I click on radial here, I can see that the color on the left side is what's in the middle. The color on the right side is, of course, on the outside, is what we're seeing. So then I can double click on this to change that middle color. And let's just say we want to make it like a pale yellow. And then on this color, double click here. And then let's just say we want this to be like, say, a kind of like a big saturated orange kind of. Ooh, and that's kind of nice, right? Like we have this like pale yellow to this big saturated orange. Maybe that got a little bit too much, and it can be like just really nice to explore subtle possibilities where now there's like much more just nuanced and softer and honestly like woo, like there's something like really absorbing by that can come from a subtle gradient. And so that's just part of the demo I want to bring in here is like oftentimes going for nuances, going for small shifts, especially with gradients, can be really, really quite absorbing for your viewers. So here, yeah, just like a soft, and actually I want to modify my yellow now to make it a little bit different. Keeping it pale, but actually maybe I just want to sort of edge it a little bit more towards orange. Then it could be a little bit lighter. There we go. And then the scale can be pretty interesting in this case. If I want to push the gradient out more towards the edges, I can scale it up a little bit. That might be one a little bit too far. So really small changes for the scaling for the radial gradient can really just make a big difference. So just little small shifts right here. Bit by bit, 100. Let's just go a little bit more. And then I'm sort of just pushing the gradient out towards the edges a little bit, like so. Interesting. Nice, cool. So that's radial. I'm going to sort of just collapse that and then go back to this. And then here's my background. And I can change that whenever I want to because it is a shape. If I click on it, I have this options with my, my tool selected here for the shape. I have this options here. I can click in there and I can modify that gradient anytime I want to. Of course, assuming I save this as a PSD that retains this as a separate layer. Okay, great. And then I'm going to have a little bit of a here I'm going to actually do custom now because I want to talk about how you can see what I was seeing with the custom shapes. So the way to do that, Photoshop actually made an update where it used to be when you go to your custom shape, like I did like right here, this little squiggly guy, it used to be the case that you would click on this cog and actually be able to load in what they call the legacy shapes from this menu. They changed that in a recent update of Photoshop. So the way that you can actually load what they call legacy shapes is by going to the window menu, and then there's a separate panel called shapes. Click on that and you actually can see the shapes panel, and all of the panels have menu options available to you in the upper right corner, these 3 lines stacked. Where's that 4? My eyes always go hooey when I'm trying to like look at this tiny thing. 3 or 4 lines right there. Maybe you can tell me. Guess my old eyes are not able to resolve that. And when you click on that, you get the menu options for that particular panel. And so in this case, I can load legacy shapes and more. So I'm going to click on this. And what happens is if I bring my boundary down and scroll down, I have a separate menu. And this is where things are just like a lot. There's a lot of stuff to actually look at in terms of sub-menus that show up as part of the legacy. And just look at this. I mean, honestly, I don't really like how they set this up because it's just so much stuff. And the thing that I like to do is actually like to have them all up here as my main menu items for just like, ease of access. What you would need to do if you want to sort of customize your own shapes panel, I'm going to make this a lot bigger, and actually maybe even just sort of just pull this out of my side right here and just make this a very large panel so I can navigate. So what you would do to actually customize this is if you say just like start with this first subfolder and then open up, say, 2019 shapes and then conifer trees. Here's a number of conifer trees. I would scroll back up to see if you can see any conifer trees up here. You probably won't because of what we were seeing in class today, but I myself see a couple. I have, well, just one really. Thought I had more trees here. If I'm not seeing the other trees, that's fine. For the purpose of this demo, I can see that there's this tree in there. Then if I can scroll down, I ask myself, okay, are any of these trees the same? Are any of these, would any of these be redundant for like what's already there? It looks like they're all different. And hopefully I can do this all as a group set. Great. So I click on the first one, select it, and then shift click on the last one. Now they're all selected. Then I can click and drag this up into my quick menu and then have them next to, like, say, this conifer tree. And now I've just like added this whole set to my main set of items up here. Now if I want to remove, because actually after a while you can just have like dozens and dozens and dozens of shapes in your main area, you might want to remove some of them to simplify it. So if you actually hover over it in your shapes panel again, you can just do a control click to delete that shape. Well, that would be deleting it from Yeah, not from Photoshop, but it would just be removing it from your custom menu, I think. Geez, it better be the case. No, it didn't pop right back in there. Yeah, so don't delete. Don't delete. What I would do is drag it back into your folder here. I mean, deleting, nothing is actually ever really deleted from Photoshop as far as these shapes go, so I'm wondering if that's just sort of hiding. But just to be safe, you could go back to that sub-menu for the conifer trees and then just click and drag this down and drop it onto that folder to bring it back. So it would be there, but it just wouldn't be like in this like large customizable menu that you can create for yourself. So you can say that I've actually already done this, and since I did this many, many years ago, it just sort of transfers to each new update that I bring into my computer with Photoshop. You have a lot to check out here, and I'm going to sort of just end my demo, not my whole demo, but my demo about customized shapes for now here, because you can just sort of see how you can actually go down the rabbit hole and really just like, explore all of these like little sub-menus, and the ones that you want to bring into your main batch of images, just sort of click and drag them up here. If you want to remove them, don't delete them, click and drag them back to the subfolder for your legacy shapes down below. So a lot of stuff to check out right here. And if you happen to have like duplicated layers, you could actually just, if you happen to have earlier duplicated some of these subgroups of shapes, you could click on it and then really just simply delete it to remove it from Photoshop. But I wouldn't do that unless you actually created a duplicate, because some of you might have done that as you were appending new items into this area. You might have some redundancy. So if there is a redundancy, sure, click on the duplicate and then you could delete it to remove it from your shapes panel. So I've just added all these trees here. Let me just close that panel entirely, click on my menu here. Again, custom shape tool selected, click on my menu, and then I can see I have these new conifer trees that I've added to this large set of custom shapes here. Okay, yeah, so I'm going to just go back to this. Let me just do one last thing. This is going to not be too quick, but something that can just be really interesting for you to explore as in terms of your creative process. So let me just change this to be a solid color. Yellow's okay, but what if I just did a pale blue? Sure, liking that for now. I'll click out of it to see how it looks. One of the things that you can do is explore repeating patterns. And so I'm going to actually just add a little bit of a stroke to this one. And this is like more of a creative, creative tip kind of demo. For the strokes, there are actually different options for the strokes. If I go into my properties panel here, I could have the stroke. The default here is to be in the inside, at least with my computer. Yours might not be the same. But if I click on this item right here, it will be centering the stroke on the outline of the edge of the shape. And then this would be having the stroke outside of the outside edge of the shape. So this is inside the outside edge. This is centering on the outside edge. And then this is outside the outside edge. Subtle differences, but as you as you play and explore more, you'll be able to see some differences. You'll be able to understand those differences better, like what this actually does. Inside, centering, or outside. I'll have this outside. And let's just imagine I'm happy with the 20%, the 20 pixels thickness there. And then I can duplicate this. And this is where I can begin to play with repeating patterns. And then with my duplication, I could, undo, click on this. Oops. Cancel. Let's get that curved arrow again. Curved arrow. Click, and then create like some playful thing about like maybe I create like this notion of the nuclear, like the atom icon that we have. That's super famous and well known. And so if I duplicate that, and then I could rotate. Gee, squirrely my rotation. Okay, there. Then rotate this one. And here I'm eyeballing it, but there's another way that you can rotate things. If you like really love regularity and math and stuff, and really like to work with numbers, when you go to free transform, Command T is the shortcut. Edit free transform is a long way to do that. Then you could actually let me just do this with a duplicate. So duplicate, and then I'm in. Let me go back to Command T for free transform. So here's my duplicate, and it's right on top of my other one, so I don't see anything different. But then if I were to click in here, if I want precisely, like say, a 16-degree change for the rotation, here's my 16 degrees there in my options panel. And again, this is if I'm in the free transform mode for editing a transformation. Or if I do -16, that would be a -16 change right here. If I want to scale it, I could just click and drag. Holding down the Option key keeps it centered. That's doing it by hand. But if I want to do it with a number, here's my percentage for the size. And constraining the option, this is to keep them constrained, which is good as a default. So then if I actually want like a specifically 9% reduction, this would be 9% smaller than what it was, or it's 91% of the original size. And then if I click on that, I can see, okay, it's slightly smaller and it's rotated. And you might imagine how I could create like an interesting kind of like pattern. Oh, it's not convert. Let me just undo that. I could create, oops, let me backstep. Oh, I just lost it in my history here. Or did I? Yeah, bring it back. But the last thing I want to show is just duplicating this one more time. Duplicate the layer here. Okay. And then I could, go to Command T and then dial in another -16%. Like for a regularity of transformation, and this could be another 91% for the size. And then, you could imagine how I might create some sort of like interesting organic kind of feeling with regularity. As you guys know from other things, I'm sure, nature really follows math and geometry in a lot of ways. And so I could create like the sense of an abstract flower by duplicating this kind of like oval thing. And then, having a regularity in terms of how it's rotated by a certain number each time and how it's reduced in size by a certain amount each time. Again, Command T gets you those transformation settings here in the options bar each time. Okay, I'm going to end my demo there because that is plenty for you guys to check out, and it's enough for you guys to get started and have some fun playing with this project. Thank you for watching.